All right. Hi, everybody. I'd like to introduce our speaker for tonight, John Paz. John is a UCF alumnus, former FTC member, and current STC member. He's also a senior content designer, user design writer, and technical writer with 13 years of professional writing and editing experience. I'd like to hand it off to you, John. Just one quick note. We're going to have a little Q&A session afterwards, so if anybody thinks of any questions they have during the presentation, just write it down or type it into the chat window and we will try to address that afterward. All right, John, on to you.
Thank you so much. This is meant to be informal. The presentation I wanted to give is probably more proprietary than is appropriate right now, and wasn't necessarily fully baked. But not super important. It was a diversity thing that I'm giving at the Button conference, which is the inaugural content design conference next month. It is cost prohibitive for students. I did not realize they're charging so much for it. Otherwise, I'd have charged them more for my speaking fee. Without diving more into that than is necessary, I do have a presentation that I gave to STC last year about tools of the trade for technical writers. And then I added a bunch of stuff about myself in there to kind of give myself a proper introduction and give you guys kind of a lay of the land and my origin story. And then we'll jump into, after talking about the tools, we'll jump into talking about my company, my employer, and why they're interesting in within your interest to kind of know about, and at least know about the suite of tools that we produce, because it's really popular among software companies. This whole experience for me is always better when I interact with folks. So ask questions away. There's no right or wrong time to ask questions or to stop me. I may jump in or out of the presentation if we seem like we got some good discussion points. I've got at least a couple of breaks in there so I can take a couple sips of water and we can check questions if I haven't already. So the stop-starty motion of this is intentional. So I feed off you guys. So if there's not at least a question by the time I'm done, I feel like I will have failed. So by all means, the more questions, the better. Everything's on the table, including the fact that my mother is a professor at the University of Central Florida in the English department. And if you've taken her class, I'm sorry, don't hate me. It's not my fault. So without further ado, I will share my screen. I figured it's always best to start with some slides. I told you, I think these things are actually better when we interact instead of watch a presentation, and it also is easier on my voice and my mouth dryness. So by all means, when something seems worth digging into, maybe I touch on a topic that you're talking about in one of your courses, or that might be particularly personally interesting to you that the group might want to know about or share. By all means, interrupt me, stop me. This is for y'all's benefit, and I'm happy to do it. So there's no strain or stress on me at all. This is I like doing this kind of stuff. So let me just double check that. Can you guys see the one slide, or are you seeing the multiple slides? Sweet. All right. So originally, my handle used to be Tech Writer Ninja. I recognize there's probably some cultural insensitivity with that. After reading an article online, I said, "Oh my goodness, I'm one of the insensitive people." And I since changed my handle to Senior Content Design. Kind of tongue-in-cheek, I call myself Senior Content Design, if only because my official title at Atlassian changed very recently. That's why, James, you probably snatched that that bio off my LinkedIn or something like that, because it's probably like 18 months outdated. My new title is actually Content Development Specialist, which means nothing to anyone anywhere, and it's just kind of a made-up term that my boss came up with. But I still primarily do documentation, content design, and user experience writing. I think James may have mistakenly said user writing. So it's user experience writing, or more commonly referred to as UX writing, which is all the rage and something that is not included in this presentation, but that I would love to talk more about, because it's actually a very interesting time to be a technical communicator, because there's all new ways to define yourself, including like content designer, UX writer, technical writer, development writer, and the pay scales and competitiveness of each of those roles and the requirements to do those roles vary drastically. So that's something that I want someone to ask me a question about or loop back around into if I haven't got to it by the time we're close to being done, because the whole conversation around the roles and the titles of what technical writers call themselves in the industry now is a fascinating conversation that's within all of your interests to understand and to be savvy about. Like I mentioned before, I get dry mouth pretty easily, so I'll be taking lots of water breaks, so you'll excuse me for that in advance. So let's get started. I always like to preface my presentations with, for those sensitive of heart, which I know you all are college students, probably not likely, I do use profanity in my presentation. Atlassian is an Australian company founded by Australians. Australians love their profanity. It was very awkward when I lived there that the kids don't mind cursing in front of grown-ups, whereas when I grew up, I would never have cursed in front of my parents or my parents' friends. My kids' friends just cursing up a storm like it's no big deal because their parents don't really care about it. But in any case, I digress. There's profanity in this, if only because Atlassian's company values have swear words in them. You'll see what I mean in a minute. I also talk really fast, so by all means, wave a hand, send up a smoke signal if I'm going too fast or y'all can't hear me or anything. So, obviously, from my background, I actually didn't have this up. This slide's 5 or 6 years old. I use it all the time. I graduated in 2008 from the English department with a degree in what was then called actually a focus in technical writing. I understand now it's technical communication. I'm a little jealous of that. It seems more diverse. But anyway, went through most of the classes that y'all are probably going through if you're majoring in technical writing, and loved it. I took forever to leave college because I didn't want to leave. I was having a good time. Now I'm actually just realized I updated the slide. I have 14 years of experience. So even though I graduated in 2008, I got my first job as technical writer in 2006 while I was still at UCF, which is one of the reasons why I was in no hurry to leave. Once you're making good money in your industry before you've even gotten your degree, you take your foot off the gas a little bit, if only because working full-time and going to school full-time is difficult. But since the beginning, I've always worked in a variety of industries, the first 10 years of which were all in Orlando. I had a very successful and bountiful career as a technical writer in the Orlando area. It's possible, and not just possible, it's likely. I picked technical writing. Actually, I probably would have considered myself either a creative writer or a potential journalist in community college and before going to university. But all it took was me seeing the employment numbers behind the career statistics of technical writers, and I was sold. I was like, so you may not be making more money than my mother, a professor with a PhD, after 2 or 3 years in the industry. I was sold. But technical writing is super varied in the responsibilities and titles, like I mentioned at the beginning of this presentation. So I've held multiple different kinds of titles, almost everything under the sun. From at one job, I was called a word processor, which killed me a little bit on the inside. And then other jobs, technical writer, I've been called a content designer, and a lot of different kinds of requirements and audience that I've written for, from the everyday public consumer, which is probably you guys and everyone, including your parents, to the highly technical, exclusively engineering audience. When I worked for Lockheed Martin for a while, we used to joke that it's not rocket science, because some of your customers or users are rocket scientists, and they don't think that joke is half as funny as I do. But it is it's par for the course that you'll write for lots of different kinds of people throughout your career, unless you're fortunate enough to just stick with one employer. But I think that's part of the appeal to me, is that the variance kind of it tickles my creative side. Right, so just a timeline in case you can't keep it all straight in your head. 2006 was when I got my first job at Siemens, just right across the street from University of Central Florida. At the time, I was working at Circuit City, a retail store, and got the phone call about a job with this engineering company I didn't really know anything about. I didn't know what the details of the job were about. I just knew that they liked my resume and wanted me to do an interview. And the rest is history. I was confident in the interview that I could do the job. I had no idea if I could actually do the job. but I had incentive because I wanted to make money and work in my profession. So I got a boss that gave me a shot. Around 2008, I finally was pushed over the edge into graduation, kicking and screaming, and worked around in defense, simulation and training, all this stuff around Research Park in the Orlando area, some stuff by Disney, or actually by Universal. I worked for a healthcare technology company. I even did a stint at EA Sports for a little while, all as a technical writer. So, I mean, just the first 10 years of my career, I had 10 different employers. So a different employer almost every year. And that wasn't deliberate. I mean, you'd like to have stability, but it was for a number of reasons. It could have been that I was a contractor on a temporary contract. Sometimes the contract would end. It could be that I got a job offer with more money. That happened regularly. Almost more than half the times I was switching jobs, it was for another job that was going to pay me more money. The companies that I was working for, I didn't have a genuine personal interest in a lot of those things. Except for EA Sports, I am a big video game head. But none of those places seemed like they had the longevity or the kind of work that was going to be particularly meaningful to me over a long period of time. So I always kept looking for what was next. A lot of people, your parents, your grandparents, aunts and uncles will tell you that job hopping is the way they refer to it, is a bad thing and it looks terrible on your resume. That might be great advice for them and for 20 years ago, but for today, as long as you have a reason and you can explain it, and you don't want to make it less than a year if you can help it. You want to try to at least hit the year mark, but there's nothing that should be keeping you tied to one job. You only show an employer as much loyalty as they'll show you. Because believe it, if they can replace you for less money, they will do so. So just the same, make sure you look out for your own interests. If that means job hopping a little bit, so be it. That's the new reality. And anyone who doesn't like it is obviously not being able to take advantage of it. Because every time I've changed jobs, I've increased my earning, and that was deliberate. And you can see a very clear trajectory of my hourly wage going up and then at one point converting to salary. So it's within your interest to find the employer that will pay you the most for your skills. And if you can make that align with your interest, that's a bonus. So around 2012, I landed my first job in software for a data integration company in downtown Orlando, a company called Pentaho. Doing data integration, data warehousing, documentation, big data stuff. Again, way over my head. Didn't really know anything walking in there about data and all that stuff. Actually, I've been dodging math my whole life. That's why I'm an English major. Again, in over my head, but this is the first time I got to use Atlassian's tools. And that was significant because I was a customer for Atlassian for 2 or 3 years before I even considered working for them. My last job before I worked for Atlassian in healthcare technology, I was actually the administrator for the Atlassian tools. Like, I have an English degree. I am not an IT person by any means. I'm tech-ish, but not a techie. It was a testament to Atlassian software, the documentation, that I was able to do that without needing a ton of support. Fast forward 2 years from there, I didn't do any writing for that company, which was a little annoying because I was the technical writer. And it seemed like I could see the writing on the wall. The company wasn't doing so great, so I started looking for the exit. And that's when I found the job in Australia. It took me about 6 months to get the courage just to apply for the job because I was worried, oh my God, what if they make me an offer? I mean, most people don't worry about that. You just kind of apply and hope for the best. But I knew I was well qualified, and I knew that this was a moment in time where I could make this pivot. I don't regret it for a bit, but when they finally made me the offer, it was pretty shocking. But they doubled my salary. They gave me relocation bonus and gave me a bunch of stock, company stock, which, we went IPO 6 months after I started. It was the best move of my career, and it took me and my family on a wild adventure. And I only just recently got back to Orlando. That says 2015, but it should be actually, my dates might be wrong here. But anyway, it should be 2020. I just moved back this summer. Now, actually, there was another slide here. Anyway, in any case, one thing you guys should know about me that I didn't include in here is that in 2003, my wife and I had the first of 3 kids. So all through university, all through all these jobs, we were raising 3 rambunctious, but beautiful and intelligent children who are now teenagers and thinking about going to UCF themselves. So it just goes to show you that You never know what to expect or what someone else is going through, but it doesn't matter what kind of challenges life throws at you. If you're ambitious and you work hard, you can make anything happen. I go around giving talks about that kind of stuff to underserved, underprivileged communities, because lots of people find themselves in the same situation as I did. And at one point, I nearly dropped out of school because it was just too hard. But because my mom's a professor and I have a family that values education, I pushed on, and it was the best decision I ever could have made. Despite me making good money as a blue-collar laborer for a while, nothing would have compared to be able to use your mind to make money, and the money is much better than when I was working as a roofer. So let's talk tools real quick. These are the things that are most important to doing your job, but there's essentially two types of knowledge when it comes to tools. There's the domain knowledge, which is how the thing that you're documenting, how it works. So it depends on which company you work for. If you're working for EA Sports, it's probably how the games are being built or how you play the games. If you're working for Lockheed Martin, it might be how a simulator has been built and how you maintain it. Excuse me. I work for Atlassian, so a lot of times I need to know how the Atlassian tools are used in the industry, including things like installing, updating. Those are things that you really can't know before you walk in the door, with some exceptions, of course, but that's the kind of thing you really have a hard time preparing for. Now, I'm sure that most of you who've been through the Intro to Tech Comm course, and probably Tech Comm 1 or 2, is that it's all about the audience, so everything's different no matter what. You always define your work by who you're writing for. That's the kind of stuff that we're talking about here. Now, the other kind of tool knowledge, I call it craft knowledge, is about how you use the tools to document the thing. So I'm thinking about Microsoft Word, Adobe, Acrobat, PDF, everything. And that is a very different kind of knowledge. Now, you can have one or the other, but of course it's much more beneficial to have both. And you'll be tested in both of those areas along your entire career. And really, it all depends on your appetite for or your curiosity to learn these things. And you go where your interests are, or where the industry leads you. You go where the money is, and you'll figure out what the right mix of the different kinds of trainings you need to take, or books you should be reading, or things you should be thinking about. But both of these things are types of knowledge that your professors might be touching on just a bit, but it's impossible for them to give you too much knowledge. They teach you how to be agnostic and learn. So they're teaching you how to learn and how to be a good, essentially a reporter, investigative reporter about how things work and how people build things. So that's an important distinction to make. You won't. It's not like anyone's going to quiz you on that, but when you think about it in that way, you can beat yourself up less for not knowing something when you apply for a job, and you know where to focus your efforts when you want to figure out how to do better, get to the next level, or get that job that you're really aiming for. Oh, I defined it in the next slide. Darn it. Yeah, it's again not required or expected, but it's nice to have. If you can walk into the door and already have these things, you're going to be, of course, ahead of the game and ahead of your peers. But because it's so specialized, you can't know those things walking in the door. But again, with my example with Atlassian, while I might not have known that that's where I was going to end up when I started using Atlassian tools, when I was started as a user, at a certain point, when I was an admin, I recognized that I got a lot of enjoyment from these tools, and I understood them, and it was specialized and kind of in demand. And so I steered myself more towards using Atlassian tools and becoming an Atlassian administrator. So it's possible to coach yourself to do these things. You kind of had to have an idea of what you want to do, and picking something out of the sky may or may not be the right thing to do. I say go where your interests are. And I guess the biggest difference is that the craft knowledge is what you will be hired on. So when you're looking for jobs on LinkedIn or wherever it is that you're looking for jobs, you'll see requirements usually listed toward the top, and it'll say things about which tools you're expected to use to do your job. These are the things that employers don't really prefer to train you on, that you're expected to know when you walk in the door. Again, I listed already a couple of examples, but I'm thinking Microsoft Word. Sometimes programming languages are things as well. And again, it's not even always cross company or cross industry, but within the same industry, you'll have similar tools. A good example is the government contract, the defense contract work that's very plentiful around Orlando. Almost all of them will have a Microsoft Word requirement. Almost all of them will have some kind of Adobe Acrobat or Adobe Suite requirement. And then they'll also have some sort of requirement around like XML or DITA or some other type of industry standard. And they usually only ask for 1 to 5 years. And so you can usually fake the funk when you get in there, but it's within your interest to actually know those things if you're going to put them on your resume, because you'll be having to use them every day. And if suddenly you find yourself not being able to fulfill the the requirements, or at least what you said you could do on your resume, you end up getting real embarrassed. It's not even a game breaker, or deal breaker, or a game changer, but you want to know your stuff going in there. At least know what you know, at least know what you don't know. Being able to have an intelligent conversation about the tools you use to build stuff is really the goal of proficiency that you're kind of aiming for with these, again, with Microsoft Word, XML, and a whole number of tools. All right, let's see here. See, this is where I don't even have presenter notes on this one. Yeah, not all tools are valued equally. Again, there's some that are kind of like entry level, that they're standard, they're kind of table stakes. The word HTML is one of those things in terms of programming languages. Here we go. I did have examples. Again, Microsoft Word is super broad. You can every company in the world uses some form of a word processor. If you don't know Microsoft Word as a technical writer, you're definitely at a disadvantage than the rest of your counterparts. And I don't mean just knowing how to open up a Word document and save it. Things like using styles inside Word, if you can automate things, if you know how to manipulate graphics and images and prepare things for print production, that's about the proficiency you need for Microsoft Word. Now, using FrameMaker, Lockheed Martin, I think, uses FrameMaker, or at least they did. I think they use Arbortext now. But in any case, it's much more specialized. It's a deeper tool. It's actually a more expensive tool. And not every employer is going to use them. Actually, most employers probably don't use it, but they do the same thing. And there's lots of similarities there. And you're not wasting your time by investing in some FrameMaker training. But the cost to do FrameMaker training is much higher than it is for Microsoft Word, which you can get Word tutorials online for free. And they also vary greatly in complexity. On the left is Trello. It's an Atlassian tool, which is probably the most simple thing you can pick up. I mean, literally, like I bet you show your grandparents, and they could hit create and start making things on their own. Whereas Oxygen XML on the right, which is what is used to to create XML documents and to write in DITA. I worked in it for 2 or 3 years, and I still scratch the surface of what you're meant to do there. Like, I actually, for that tool, you need a developer to create the kind of styles and output and to integrate with other tools. You can't know everything about Oxygen and XMetal and things like that. It's not, you're not supposed to. That's okay. So but the part you're supposed to know, you should know, and it only as it relates to your operating procedures. So it varies wildly in complexity. You figure out where you invest your time is where you have some interest, or when you find a job or a company you want to apply for. And of course, cost. Cost is the biggest thing when you're a college student, when you're thinking about what tools to learn. So I always say open source and freeware is your best friend, if only because you don't run the risk of having to get pirated versions of things or trials that run out. And these tools are built on industry standard kind of interface standards, for lack of a better word. So I use GIMP for the past 15 years, and just literally this year, my boss asked me to get Photoshop to edit some files, and I actually never really used Photoshop in any depth, but because I was so familiar with GIMP, and GIMP uses very similar terminology to Photoshop, I was able to pick up very quickly on how to use Photoshop, or at least know how to ask the right questions and search the help documentation. That's usually the most of the battle is terminology. Once you understand what things are called in the interface, then you know how to Google it. Google is your best friend. Stack Overflow is your best friend. You can figure anything out. But when you're a student, don't shell out money for enterprise software. Always look for an education version, a student version, or whatever. Don't spend your hard-earned money on these things. This is what your employer is meant to provide for you once you start. I'm going to have a quick pause, and I'm going to check for questions, although I don't even know how I can do that now. John, do we have any questions? Am I going too fast?
No questions so far, unless anybody has
There's
one.
no questions in the chat.
Awesome, perfect. So yeah, so these are the big three. These are the three types of tools, and there's a whole bunch of tools that will fall under this that may be exactly this, that may be do some of this, but in any case, these are the big general categories that you're going to want to focus on, or at least know a couple of these in each of these categories. Word processors, Microsoft Word, Google Docs, and Apple, I think it's called Pages. All of those things are your bread and butter as a technical writer. It's within your interest to know how to make those things sing. You should look like a superhero using those tools, if only because it solves a lot of problems for you, and it makes you more valuable as an employee, because your boss and your boss's boss will use Microsoft Word to write a document. So if you know how to solve their problems, it makes you much more valuable. That's always what you should be thinking about, is how do I create and provide value at work? That's how you make yourself indispensable. And help authoring tools. Again, I think Arbor Text, Robotext, and there's a bunch of other Adobe products that do this. These vary greatly in cost and complexity and kind of the barrier for entry. But when you're picking something, if you had a learning budget or you had to pick a place to focus some energy, you could do much worse than help authoring tools. Image editors are slept on by tech writers. People think that only graphic designers or visual designers are people who need to use Photoshop and GIMP and things like that. And I say malarkey, because I use those things every single day, and I actually invested time and energy in learning how to do interesting and creative things with them for my own personal projects, and that translated to direct value at work when I didn't have to ask a designer to do some simple edit, because I know how to use my Photoshop, so I can just jump in and do it myself. I know how to create prototypes of applications using using a UI kit, or software development kit. I can do all these things because I just have an interest in them. It's not because I'm special. It's not because I'm extra smart. It's because I was like, oh, that's cool. I want to learn how to do that. And then I put that shit on my resume, and a recruiter picked it up and thought that that was useful. So, but even if the recruiter doesn't think that's useful, I still always add it to my resume, my LinkedIn profile, and then I make sure that my employer knows, oh, I can do it. I can do graphics. I can do images too. And it's also translated to a lot of interesting kind of peripherals, things like this presentation, and other stuff that I do for my personal portfolio and website, all that stuff. It's within your interest to learn those things. I'm going to fly through some of these things. Yeah, Flare, that's the other one. Madcap Flare is definitely an industry standard tool that I can't stand, and I don't want to touch it ever again if I can help it. Snagit is the bomb. I think it's a little overpriced. Whatever screen cropping tool you use, know how to use it. You shouldn't have to learn how to do screen cropping or screen captures on your first day. You should be able to do this inside and out, including a couple other things. Especially if you're targeting jobs in the software industry, which I would strongly encourage everyone on the line to consider, because they pay the most and they're the most plentiful. Again, Photoshop, GIMP, those things are industry standard. GIMP is free, and it is great. Steep learning curve, but there's more resources and tutorials out there than you'll ever need. And so don't be shy, jump right in there. I mean, start editing with your photos, start creating graphics, start, trying to make things look the way you want them to. And learning that stuff on your own will always pay dividends later on in your career. Some specialized tools, and this all depends on where you go with your career. These are some things that you might want to. Let me see, do I have? Yeah, I do. Cool. So I'll fly through these, and I go into a little bit more detail, just like the last section. So UX design tools, things that you use in coordination or collaboration with a visual or UX designer. Developer tools for reading and writing code, generating code, interacting with lots of different programming languages. Project tracking tools, there's more than them than anyone needs to consider in a lifetime, but they're how you'll get your job done. They're how your boss gets your job done, and it's how you are able to report on what you've accomplished. So, like all the other stuff, it's within your interest to know these things, or at least to know that they exist and what they're used for. And finally, video editing tools. It's almost prophetic that I put this in the slide. When I made this, I didn't do much video editing at all. It's just I just kind of threw it in there. Now today, almost a quarter of my job is doing video editing, creating tutorials, and things like that. So, I mean, that's if you had known these things when you started tech writing school, quote unquote, you'd have said bullshit. But I'm telling you, the variety of stuff I work on keeps me interested, and it keeps me in demand, because these are things that they may not ask for, but because I can do them, it makes me more valuable. Sketch is industry standard for UX design tools. It is expensive, but there's an education version. It's great. It's how designers build applications, basically. And then you take sketch files and you can put them in InVision. And InVision, you can kind of make each part of your static image into like a clickable portion. And then you can have multiple static images and kind of create a prototype, which will look and behave like an application, but it's just images. So and for most people, most lay people, they won't know the difference between a prototype or an application, but this is how you can kind of demonstrate value and how you'd be expected to interact with the dev team if you worked in software. To me, they're just darn fun. These are also things that you'll use if you're working with developers or in software. GitHub and Git in particular. If you take nothing else away from my talk, go learn Git. So GitHub is a Git provider. Git is a technology that you use to version code that you use to build software. Now, if you're still following along, GitHub is just one provider to use Git with. Git is something that you use locally, that you can store another version inside the cloud so that you can work on with other people. So that I have a version and that you have a version, and we create them with branches, and then we can merge those branches to kind of iterate on the code in a way that's predictable and that lets us test. If you're into that sort of stuff, I say either you can reach out to me later or get started Googling that stuff. Knowing Git will make you invaluable to the kind of the big high-tech companies, the Googles, Facebooks, Apples of the world, Tesla. All these places will expect you to know Git if you want to work with software developers and with software in particular. And in Git files, I mean, you don't really use Git files. You use Git to check in files, and those type of files are created or edited with a text editor like Notepad++, which is free. These other ones I've listed here are free as well. Notepad++, Atom, Sublime, I think has a free version. But the type of files you'll be editing, HTML files, Markdown files, all those things are kind of lightweight programming languages that technical writers are expected to know enough so they can write, edit, and contribute to the documentation that is stored, for all intents and purposes, in a programming language, a code file. So what you see in Microsoft Word is a WYSIWYG editor. What you see is what you get, is what WYSIWYG means. But even a Microsoft Word document is actually an XML document behind it. When you open it up, you'll see lots of tags. It looks like code on the back of even Microsoft Word document. Markdown and HTML are another type of programming language that you can use to render documentation. I won't go too much deeper into that, but that's fun stuff. And there is a desperate need for more tech writers who do this kind of stuff, and it's the highest paying of all tech writing jobs. So project issue trackers, these are Atlassian tools. They're industry standard. I talk about them because I love them, because I work for the company that makes them, and because I genuinely believe they're great tools. We now, since this presentation, we have free versions of Jira. Trello has always been free. And if you are like me and in college you had a hard time, I had a hard time keeping organized, remembering what I turned in and what I didn't, I say try Trello. Keep all your assignments. I mean, it's got columns. You can name columns, start to-do lists, set reminders, invite people. Yeah, I don't know why college, they should force you all to use something like Trello to keep track of all your tasks and things. You do well to do that yourself. And it'll be useful when you get into the workforce as well, because employers use these things to track their tasks too. Jira comes in 3 different flavors. Before this, it was just one. But for the most part, it's definitely used in Agile and software development companies. Video editing tools, Camtasia, iMovie. I actually use something called ScreenFlow now. They all work very similar. Adobe Premiere is another one. And they're not trivial to learn, but even if you just learn it to edit your own home movies, they're a lot of fun and they're super powerful, make you look like a pro. Oh, I did talk about what's in the name here. So different roles do different things, but a degree in technical writing or in English kind of gets you at the entry level of all these different types of roles. Some of these are more plentiful than others. For instance, API writer, you might not see it written like API writer. It might say developer documentation writer or SDK writer. But in any case, you're writing for a developer audience, people who write and make code. A UX writer works with designers to work on UI copy. That's all the rage. And it is, while not every company hires UX writers, there's always some UX writing going on. Google hires a lot of UX writers, so does Apple, so does Facebook, so does LinkedIn, Intuit, all the big San Francisco-based, Silicon Valley-based companies. If they don't have UX writers, they have content designers. If they don't have content designers, they have some other kind of advanced form of technical writer. Technical writers still exist there, and there's still probably more of those than UX writing. But UX writing, there's not really a degree in it. You know, it's so new that we're still defining what UX writing is. You can go on Medium or Twitter, and you'll find any number of very recent and kind of fought over articles about what is UX writing, how do you know if you're a UX writer, what should the qualifications be for UX writer. So it's one of those things that I would strongly encourage you all to explore, and to ask about of your professors as well, because this is, when it's new like this, that means anyone can jump in and start becoming an expert in it, and that there's going to be lots of money to be made as a UX writer. Content strategy has been around for a very long time, and it can encompass a lot of different responsibilities, like organizing a website or creating content strategy across products. It varies so greatly, I won't get too deep into it, but if you're a big picture type person, information architecture and content strategy is going to be your best friend. Actually, they're great for people who also majoring in like library science or information systems. It's a very good mix of technicality, technical stuff, and the writing kind of proficiency that you're developing now as a technical writing student. This was, I guess, the end of my other presentation, and I don't use Technical Writer Ninja anymore, so I use SR Content Design, Senior Content Design. Yeah, so again, I'll take another pause here. Check any questions?
Yeah, actually, Russell asked a while back about screen capturing software. You basically was wondering, like, why would you need screen capturing software when you can just use like the shortcut on their laptop?
Right, that's a great question. So when you use the shortcut on your laptop, it gives you a couple of options, or you can take a big screen, or a whole screen, or a partial screen. But what happens after that is it just creates an image for you. When I use Snagit, and actually I have Snagit open right now. This is the fun part. With Snagit, it also comes with a bunch of editing stuff as well. It's a very lightweight Adobe Photoshop. So you can see, I took let's see, where's one of the things? This is a great one. Just taking a screenshot of my tweet. I'm one of the few people who because none of my friends and family do Twitter very well, and I'm pretty prominent on Twitter. I capture my tweets and share them on Facebook because I know they think it's hilarious. But I took a screenshot, and then I'm able to crop it. I'm able to do a bunch of other stuff, and including, let's see, what zooms in my way here. Do arrows and things like that. I mean, it's industry standard. It's pretty inexpensive comparatively speaking. And to do this, to create a screenshot, drop it into Photoshop, go to the arrow. I mean, it's probably 3 more steps than it is doing Snagit. But when you have to do a lot of screenshots, Snagit really saves time, and it also organizes your stuff in a pretty interesting way. So there's lots of reasons. Yeah.
So basically, it's just like it has like more access to editing stuff and it's quicker. Like you quickly edit more. Okay.
Yeah, and actually I don't know, so I'm using a Mac now, but I think that when I was, you can't really video capture as well. I don't know what the shortcut is for video capture, if you can even do that on Mac or even Windows, but Snagit has video capture as well. You can video capture, and including doing voiceover and things like that. So it's really powerful. But it's not for everybody, and sometimes you can get away doing stuff without it. Shit, where did my screen go? Let me see. Oh, there we go. Let me get back to it.
I've also had one extra question, which was,
sure.
So you need special programs for specific functions that are part of another program?
Let me see. Where's the question at here? You need special programs for specific functions that are part of another program. I've seen Trello used for game development roadmaps. Yeah, so first part of your question, special programs for specific functions. Yes and no, it varies amongst employers. So for technical writing in Atlassian, we have at least two kinds of technical writers, the content designers like I am, who do about half technical writing, half UI copy or UX writing. And then you have developer technical writers. Now the skill set for both is very similar, but to be a developer technical writer, you'll be expected to know HTML, Markdown, how to use static site generators like Jekyll or Hugo, and you probably should know a programming language. I mean, you might not be able to be a developer, but you'd have to know programming language to even get in the door at that role. Whereas a content designer, I don't need to know any programming language. I don't need to know Git. I don't need to know HTML, although it's beneficial because we do some styling stuff. To not know it can be a learning curve at Atlassian, but I didn't need any of that stuff to get hired here for my content design role. So to answer your question, yeah, you special programs, I wouldn't think about it about special. They're not actually special. They're kind of industry leading things, and they do a bunch of stuff. It all depends on what job you're aiming at. The biggest consideration is, what do you want to do, or what job are you trying to get, and what are their expectations? Like, to be a developer or technical writer, you would have to know Git already. Like, you can't learn Git on the job. Like, your day one, you'll be making commits, checking things out, pulling things, pushing things, creating branches. But for content designer, I don't need to know that stuff. When I got hired, I didn't know Git, but I had to learn it within my first couple of weeks here because the product I worked on used Git. So I think I answered your question there. Yeah, Trello is used for everything under the sun. I know people who've used Trello to plan their weddings. I use Trello to track my conversations with my mentees so that I don't lose track of who I've talked to and when and things like that. Trello is the most flexible of all of Atlassian's tools. You can use it in any way you want. So it's great. See other questions here. Trello has also been proposed by some of my colleagues for coordinating, organizing their events. Absolutely. I mean, event organizers love it. I mean, the best selling point of Trello is that it's should make you all pay attention, because enterprise software is not always free. But yeah, it can be used for anything. I would say give it a shot. Give me some feedback. I'd love to hear how it goes for you. If anything, if you're using Trello, make an account on community.atlassian.com. Start a little discussion posting there about my interest or my experience using Trello as a college student. Watch how much traction it gets, or at least it's something you can use in your portfolio later. Those kinds of things, you just, instead of calling it a blog post, call it a use case or a case study, and now you've got portfolio fodder. So Windows and Macs don't natively have video capture, but you could use OBS for capturing and recording your screen. Yeah, so that's the thing, is that the native screen capture tools, they're very limited. They're fine, especially if you don't want to pay for something. They're absolutely fine to be used for free. It just takes a little bit more time or a couple more steps to do some of the stuff that you can do in Snagit with the snap of your fingers. Let's see. Oh, community.atlassian.com. Kurt asked what website did I just mention. So Atlassian is my employer. I actually have a little tour of Atlassian in the next part of my presentation. Atlassian is the employer, and Atlassian, we own Trello. We didn't make Trello, but we acquired them, and now they're part of our suite. So community.atlassian.com is where Atlassian users go to. It's like Stack Overflow, but for Atlassian. It's just a discussion board, but Atlassians, we do use it to pump out messages directly to audience. Like, I've actually had to publish things on Atlassian. If you find my name on Community, you'll see I've got a bunch of kind of work stuff and non-work stuff that I get lots of upvotes for. But yeah, community.atlassian.com is just one place to share your experience and anything. Professional communities are your best friend. There's no such thing as too many of them. Atlassian is just one around a tool. I'm sorry, community.atlassian, just one around a tool. All right, cool. I'll keep jumping into the questions and jumping out of the presentation. That's perfect. That worked exactly how I imagined it would. Fantastic. Right. So the last part I was going through is about the tools. This next part is about how I actually do things, or how I get shit done. And GSD is an acronym that we use quite a bit at Atlassian. And it's just kind of a polite way to say get shit done. I made this when I lived in San Francisco. I used to commute 1 hour each way every day, except for probably once a week I'd work from home, from the East Bay in Dublin to the city in San Francisco. Now, some people think that kind of commute is excessive. It's a lot. And for Florida people, they think, oh my God, I could never commute for a whole hour. Anything longer than 45 minutes to Florida people is like, nope, never going to go there unless I pack a bag. But in the Bay, that's kind of the norm. I mean, it takes nothing's closer than 45 minutes in the Bay. And the commute, I mean, I love taking public transportation. I used to do that every day when I lived in Sydney as well. I kind of miss that, actually, working from home. This was my view from the Sydney office when we started at our new building. I actually started when we were in an older building, and this was like our first introduction to the building, but it's not bad at all. And right behind one of these buildings actually is the Opera House. Wish I got one with the Opera House in it. This is that same new building. Again, our introduction kind of walkthrough, but you can see Atlassian pulls out all the stops. This is why I still work for there. And I told you I had a different job every year for the first 10 years of my company. Well, I've been working for Atlassian for almost 6 years now. I found like I hit the jackpot with this role, not just because they pay me really well, and they do. And that's not bragging. That's trying to be encouragement. Y'all should aspire to that as well. That just because you have an English degree doesn't mean you can't make 6 figures. Like, seriously, like, don't let people tell you that people with English degrees don't make money. You point in my direction, and I'll tell them they're a liar. Because this is but the perks of Atlassian don't stop with good salary. Like, they got free food, free drink. Of course, when COVID was not happening, this makes me a little nostalgic.
Sorry to interrupt you, but your screen
sharing
sharing is like lagging a little bit. Like, some people aren't seeing the images. Like, it's
sharing is paused. Oh, I see it. I see what it is. It says sharing is paused because I had the wrong screen at the front.
I'm sorry for interrupting you. But
no, I'm glad you did. I'm so glad you did, because otherwise I'd be just talking to myself.
Sometimes Zoom does that. Sometimes Zoom does that. I've seen it happen with my professor, so you're not alone.
Yeah, I am almost certain it's a me problem. Hold on one second. Let me get back to it. Oh man, that sucks. This part of the presentation is all about the pictures. Where is Zoom now? Share screen now. All right, I'm just going to share the whole desktop instead, so y'all see yourself for a moment. All righty, so can you see the slides now? And how about now? All righty. This was the picture on the commute, on the train, on the BART. And this is I just took this picture because the BART is never that empty. Like, it's almost always standing room. People with their I call it armpit city, because you're in everywhere with their hand over their head. It's actually a lot of fun, and I kind of miss it now. This is the view of Sydney, overlooking the harbor. It is just as beautiful as people tell you it is. This is the lunchroom with all the free stuff. This was a brand new facility that they opened while I was working there. I moved from one building to the next, and each time the facilities were improved. And there's a whole kitchen staff at the Sydney office, and they're making fresh hot lunch every day. And from 8 o'clock on, those empty things there are filled with warm food or salad stuff. And it's a great way to live. I say that again to encourage you all, not bragging, although it is a bit of a humble brag. Oh, at last, this is the San Francisco office during the World Cup. We had a bunch of people who like soccer. We went and told HR, can you please let us watch a soccer game? And this is the Women's World Cup, actually. And we had a great time watching it. When the games are on at good times during the workday and you're not working from home, we try to put them up on a big screen. A couple of times I also organized FIFA tournaments where we'd stay after work at Atlassian and order us beer and pizza, and one of us would bring our extra Xbox in, and we just would play for hours and eventually crown a champion. So yeah, we have a lot of fun. More lunchroom. This is the San Francisco office. This is the Austin office, which I visit a couple of times a year. It's very different than the other offices, but I figured I'd give y'all a little shout out there. A little picture. This is what my desk looked like when I was sitting in San Francisco. 2 4K monitors and a MacBook Pro. It always looks like that. I wish I could say that it's messy, but that's actually cleaned up version of it. But you can see right in the middle there, my little handy dandy notebook, my analog notebook. Look what page I'm on. That's dedication. I used almost every page in that. There you go. Who's that? Sky? Is that a moleskin there?
Yes.
Yeah. So this is actually one that there you go, all day. And so that's like when I give these talks to college students, I always get the question, what's the one tip, if you could give people just one tip that you would go to make you be more successful, it's that you keep your day-to-day tasks analog. everything you're going to work on for the rest of your career is going to be digital. And I don't know about you guys, but I have ADHD, and all that digital stuff all the time can be overwhelming, and it's hard to keep track of where I am every day. It's like you open up your computer and you got 100 tabs open. Where do you begin? My source of truth and my comfort zone is always going back to that journal. And it's actually, if you ever heard of bullet journaling, I very much write and take my notes in the style of bullet journaling. And I use different colored pens, sticky notes. I'll use markers. I put effort into it because it's I also do it to help me keep paying attention while I take notes. But it absolutely grounds me. And it wasn't until I started getting in trouble at work for being distracted to when I had to find that method, the analog method, to bring me back to some sort of concentration.
It's a godsend. I love bullet journaling.
I love it. Oh my goodness, went too far. I love bullet journaling. It's I've been doing it for years. I didn't know it had a name, and when I found it on Reddit, I had tears in my eyes. I was like, this is what I've been doing. It has a name. My wife's like, go easy there, champ. You're talking about writing in a journal. Just take it easy. And you see behind there, actually, that black book underneath the monitor is a Panda planner, which is not a blank planner. It's got dates and things in it, and I can't use it because I need to be able to do whatever I want with it. So that's just a fun thing there. This is just a picture of a whiteboard desk and a diagram I drew planning some stuff with my colleague. See if I can figure this out. It's a component diagram. I mean, this is my sweet spot. This is where people love to watch me work because this is how I think. This is almost exactly what my notes tend to look like. I won't go to too much detail, but man, that looks like fun. I wish I was still doing stuff like that. Yeah. Just showing how I do a lot of Zoom meetings. Even back then, I was doing more Zoom meetings than anybody wanted to. And now it's all Zoom all the time because I work remotely from Orlando. My team sits in San Francisco. Yeah, so let's see here. Ooh, animations. The tools I use every day, just because it's important to know what stack I use. And again, this is a couple years outdated, but I still use all these things. Slack for getting in touch with my teammates, Gmail, which I ignore all the time. Confluence, which is, again, one of those tools you should write down. It's a wiki. It's Atlassian's documentation solution. If you work for a software company, they almost always will have a Confluence or a Confluence competitor. But just like you've heard of Wikipedia and all those other different wikis, Confluence is a wiki. I think we have a free version now too. If not, get in touch. I can hook you up. But it is how we publish documentation in Atlassian. We kind of dog food our own products. That all the doc you see from Atlassian, with some exceptions, were created and managed and published in a wiki. And all wiki is just allows you to collaborate with anybody. It's instead of having just one owner, it's something that anybody can jump in and edit and create pages. It's of course much more nuanced than that, but that's one of those tools of the trade that your professors might not ever talk about because it's very new and it's very fluid and there's lots of different kinds of wikis. But just knowing how to contribute to a wiki will make you incredibly valuable to a software company. And it's one of those things that developers hate to do, program managers hate to do, product managers hate to do it. So if you get good at it, then all of a sudden you become the wiki guy or wiki girl. And then it's just, again, another way to make money. Jira we use for project tracking. We use it all day, every day. Jira is my boo. I love it. Whereas I say Jira is like, my relationship is like Jira is like a good friend, whereas Confluence is like my wife. And Bitbucket is how we check in code. I have to collaborate with developers all the time. If I need to get a copy of their code, I usually have to go to Bitbucket, download, clone a copy, and use it that way. Sorry, I went through that kind of fast. If you want more information about tools and stuff, I'm happy to dig in deeper. But some people, it's hard to visualize, and it's not always where people want the conversation to go. I'm trying to keep it high level for this talk. So if you want to dig deeper into tool stuff, happy to do that as well. So day to day, this is essentially what my life was like when I went into when I was working in San Francisco. So I would start with my long ass commute and do a daily stand up. I worked on any number of teams, between 1 to 4 or 5 teams on a time. And daily stand-up is something that it's a terminology for agile methodology or Scrum. Just a 15-minute meeting where we talk about what did we do yesterday, what are we going to do today, and is there anything impeding your progress or blocking you? It's extremely useful, versatile type of meeting that where you're meant to touch base at least once a day with your nucleus of a team. I'll get into Agile a little bit more at the very tail end of the presentation if we think that we've got some appetite and I haven't blown your brains up with information by then. I would update some tasks in Jira, write a draft in Confluence, leave some comments for a colleague or ask for comments from another colleague, respond to chats all day long, ignore emails, attend meetings, lunch. I mean, this was my life. And it's not much different today, although I use different sets of tools. But this is what I was telling you. While learning a tool is definitely important, I did say that's something you should try to do. Look at all the different tools I use just on a day-to-day basis. If I try to learn any one of these tools before I got to Atlassian, I don't know how Atlassian uses these things. So, and it wasn't useful for me to know. What if Atlassian decided to go with Microsoft Teams instead of Slack? Learning Slack, which is just a chat tool, they all work the same. I don't need to learn Slack. But I know how to use it. I know what it's used for. I know how to integrate with Slack and do other things. But I didn't need to know that until I started working at Atlassian. But all these tools were things that I had some familiarity with, but that Atlassian I kind of honed in on a lot. And of course, at the end of every day at Atlassian, there's always people hanging out at the bar. Yes, there is a bar at Atlassian, and they have free alcohol, including free beer, wine. At the Sydney office, they have 3 kegerators with always different craft. Actually, no, it's San Francisco too. Beer on tap, a different craft beer. They rotate every week. Yeah, we get down. Again, end of that part of the presentation. We'll take another quick break. We'll check questions, comments. Maybe we want to jump on something different, more dig in. All right. See, I don't have the chat open. Every time I go, oh, there are chats. Let's see here. Are these questions? Oh, this is when you guys were telling me I was stuck. Nice. All right.
No questions.
So no questions. We'll
But guy would think your workplace is just really appealing, and staying neat is just always a great thing to have. And then Kurt asked in the chat, he wants to ask what your Twitter handle is, so he can follow you.
Actually, I'll do you one better. Let me go get you a link to my. You guys can still see my screen, right?
Yep.
This is my family, and this is a recent. I realized I had to go back to. This is when we lived in San Francisco. My kids are. My oldest is 17. My middle child is 16, and my youngest, my son, is 14. He's a freshman. So my youngest is a freshman in high school. Yes, I am as young as I seem. And I mentioned, I kind of glossed over at the beginning of my presentation, but my wife and I had kids when we were real young. We dated when we were in high school, and summer after we graduated, we got pregnant with our first child, and that's where, it's the story of my life now. I've had kids when we were 19, and at the time, I looked and felt crazy, and in retrospect, it was crazy, but I look like a genius now. It's like I'll be, let's see, 4 more years, I'll be 40, and my youngest will be 18. I'll be an empty nester when I'm 40. So I look like an insane person when I did it, but now I look like a genius. So I'll take it. Into my Twitter handle real quick before I post it in there. It's the same thing as senior content design. So SR content design. I'll post it in the chat here. Boom. There we go. Question. This is James. In your experience, is there a need in the field to be familiar with the Mac OS or Windows alternately, specifically? No, I don't think it's important to know either. In terms of being an expert at using the operating systems, you should totally be familiar with them though. Like, you don't want to be a Windows dude or a Windows girl, and then you get hired by a job and they're using all Mac, and you're like, oh, what do I do? So it's great to have some experience with it, and you can get some free virtual machines if you have a Mac and want to use a Windows, or Windows and want to use a Mac. But it's super not important, to be honest with you. I mean, they all work kind of the same, and they, I don't think it's terribly important. Although if you are uncomfortable using them, that's something you should dig in on, because you don't want to be uncomfortable using either operating system. And if you know Linux, you get double points, because It's extra complicated for no reason, and it is what developers like to use. And it does force you to know how to use the command line or the terminal. So it does teach you some programming concepts and how to kind of talk and act like a developer. So if you have the tolerance for that, I say more power to you. Linux is free. It's just way more involved and complex than you need to be for an operating system, and you end up spending more time fiddling with the OS and actually doing stuff. So I say yes, you should know both, because your employer could use either. Do I think it's critically important to go do some Mac OS training? Probably not. So from Michael says, been excellent, cheers. Are there any top recommendations of open source tools besides GIMP to familiarize ourselves with? Yes, Git is open source, Git, Git. But you'll want to, if you just Google how to use Git, you'll end up with a bunch of tutorials, and you probably won't get very far, because to use Git is, you use Git for managing a project. If you don't have a project to use Git with, you start trying to make things up. So I say, when you're making yourself a portfolio, or just if you want to do a GitHub tutorial or a Bitbucket tutorial, use that in the context. But Git is an open source technology that you won't learn about in any of the tech writing courses, and maybe you will, I doubt it, but it will pay for itself in terms of getting you attention. Like, as soon as you understand what Git is used for and how to do the most basic of things in Git, put that on your LinkedIn profile, and even before you graduate, you'll have attention from recruiters. You should be genuinely interested or genuinely knowledgeable to say at least you know what it is and how to use it and what it's used for. But say, to hold nothing back, Git is the bomb. I wish I used more open source tools now, but because most of the stuff I use is enterprise, my employer pays for all of it, so I use fancy tools, unfortunately. If you want to, from Russell, if you want to work with graphics and stuff like that, I've been using Inkscape. Inkscape is great. Definitely use Inkscape. It's tough. Inkscape is not trivial to learn. If you can learn to use Inkscape, you'll be very, very valuable. It doesn't have a lot of application in the tech writing world, but if you even like graphics a little bit, Inkscape will teach you some fun stuff. It's challenging though. It's a steep learning curve, much steeper than GIMP, but it's got many more applications than GIMP though, or different applications that are a little bit more complicated. That bit on Linux definitely goes with my question above. Any others? Okay, cool, sweet. The brakes are working perfectly. I did not think they would. Are we doing on time? Oh, I almost out of time. Oh my goodness. I want to jump ahead. I talked about Atlassian a ton. Is there anything interesting here? Atlassian is okay. These are values I was telling you about. Open company, no bullshit. Play as a team. Build with heart and balance. Be the change you seek. Don't fuck the customer. Like, when I read Atlassian's values the first time, I was like, these are values to live by, not just the values to kind of build software by. Like, I genuinely feel an attachment to these values, and we use them on a regular basis to kind of conjure important notions when we're kind of arguing back and forth about making product changes. I will say, I don't want to create this documentation because it's just a band-aid for a broken experience. What we should do is spend time fixing the experience. I don't want to fuck the customer. And my boss will say, that's cool, we ain't got time or engineering resources to do that, write the doc. And I'm like, okay, I'll write the doc. But in any case, you use these things to empower yourself to do things. And Atlassian is kind of unique in this regard. Although every company has values, I don't know any company that uses their values on a daily basis like we do. And again, not being an Atlassian homer, whether you work for Atlassian or not, it's not going to make a difference to me. But I think that it's incredibly valuable for a company to have values that they live by. All right, my only other question for you now, which exact program did you make this very clean looking presentation on? Ooh, thanks, Kurt. So this is Keynote, Mac proprietary software. It is amazing, and it is really slick looking. It makes you look like a champ. I have to admit that Atlassian has a template that one of my colleagues makes. So you can see it's all these really beautiful looking slides. And of course, a very fun and interactive guide on how to use them, which I violate all the time. But yeah, the long answer longer, It's a template that my company puts out. A designer makes these things and puts them out, including these little icons and things like that. But Keynote makes it easy. I'm a Microsoft Office guy for everything except for presentations. Once you've used Keynote, you'll think PowerPoint is for cave people. One other thing I wanted to make sure I touched on that, again, I kind of chucked in here a little towards the end from another presentation, but I thought you guys would be very useful. And I know we're coming up at time. I'll try to be mindful of that. If you guys need to jump, you won't hurt my feelings. My next meeting doesn't start till 6, so actually I have some time to hang out a little bit. Again, by all means, you're not going to hurt my feelings if you need to jump. But I mentioned it a couple times already about Agile or the Agile software development methodology, as it's formally called, although I don't think it's called a methodology. What it is easier to be defined by what it is not, and it's not waterfall. So Agile is on one spectrum of project management methodology, and waterfall is on the other. And the difference is variance and predictability. Whereas waterfall is meant for like industrial revolution, you know exactly who to hand the work off to. You have a testing department, a planning department, everyone knows their job and they stay in their lane. That's actually not a bad way of doing things, right? It's the way things have been done since the Industrial Revolution. We do them that way for efficiency, for proficiency, to build lots of stuff in a very similar kind of way. But it is not always the best way to build things today. Industrial Revolution was groundbreaking and got everything that we're looking at and using today. But when you're building software, or the landscape, the competitive landscape and the market landscape of things changes on a daily basis. Your competitors are releasing features all the time. You're having startups being born. You have people building shit all the time to take a piece of your pie. So you have to be able to move quickly or to be agile. It's so appropriate. But the origins of Agile is a bunch of white guys got together in a room, all engineers, and I apologize for my frankness, but it is what it is. And if they'd had a technical writer in the room, this shit wouldn't be so hard and cryptic, because a lot of technology, a lot of terminology they use, I take issue with it, but I can do that because I'm a Scrum Master. I have been using Agile methodology for development to build software and to work on an Agile team for almost 10 years now. I've had lots of dedicated training on being an Agile person, so I can be critical of it. Your job is to understand what it's used for and what it means and where you play a role in that. The Agile Manifesto, you can Google on your own time sometime. It's fun to read. You can tell it was written by engineers and not a technical writer, but it values the things on the left over the things on the right. And these sets of principles guide everything that you do in Agile. Individuals' interactions over processes and tools. Working software over comprehensive documentation. Tech writers always love to poke at that one right there because you think comprehensive documentation is what you want. It's not. Nobody ever wants that because no one's ever going to read it. Customer collaboration over contract negotiation. These are ways on the right are ways things have been done since forever. Like Industrial Revolution type stuff, business processes, finance. You'll find all those things. The emphasis is on the things on the right. The things on the left is a different kind of world that we're trying to emphasize these things, and it looks very different than how most people have done business. 4 values of Agile, again, a bit of a reiteration there just because that last slide sucked, but it's easy to get behind, much like Atlassian's values. And Atlassian's values and Atlassian's tools are actually built to work side by side with the Agile methodology. That's why when you think of Agile, a lot of people think of Atlassian and think of Jira, our flagship product. That's why these things are meant to go together. 12 Agile principles. Again, I'll fly through these things. They break down even further, but I highlighted the key words here, and that it's value. It's not, you don't see the word money or profit anywhere in here. It's about building great software, building great experiences, because when you emphasize those things, these kind of principles, the outcome is almost always more money. It's almost always that you have something that people want to buy and pay and give you money for. Where does that, why is that important to you? Because no matter how you think of coding or building software, this is really cool stuff. And just like with Atlassian's values are useful for your everyday life, these Agile methodology can be used in everyday life as well. And this, to me, it's interesting. You know, it's just another way of doing shit. Oh, I missed the opportunity for the meme. Damn. Oh well. So Scrum is a flavor of Agile. And I won't get into the nitty-gritty details. If you've ever heard of rugby, in rugby there's a thing called a scrum, and that's what you see the picture in the background. A scrum is just a gathering of people. Two teams come together and they have to hash it out, and the end result, a ball squirts out and a bunch of grown men tackle each other. That's not important, but what is important is that Scrum is related to Agile. Now, Scrum is Agile. Agile's not always Scrum. Again, you can go down a rabbit hole one day. I'm sure there's a bunch of YouTube videos you could find. But in principle, Agile is the why. It's why are we doing this? What's the, what are our guiding philosophies? And Scrum is how you do these things. It's a set of rules, templates, documents, and rituals all around how to interact with your team. And this is where the rubber hits the road. And it's actually where, I call myself a Scrum Master. A Scrum Master is essentially a moderator for a Scrum team. They help plan, they help guide things. Scrum Masters don't traditionally do the work. They help organize the work and organize the team. Again, this presentation was originally designed to go in much deeper detail on Agile. And again, I've already squirted enough information into this thing to fill up 3 or 4 presentations, but because I talk fast, I'm able to run through it. So if you want to write these things down or take screenshots or whatever, review this thing later, by all means, dig deep. There's lots of stuff here. It's fascinating. And all of it is within your interest to know to work for a software company like Atlassian or Facebook or anything. Facebook, Google, Apple, all of them use Agile and Scrum in one way, shape, or form. You'll be expected to know this walking in the door, although if you don't have a lot of experience with it, it's not a big deal, especially early in your career. But you make yourself exponentially more hireable by knowing just that Agile and Scrum exist. If it's your first day, you will, you will be expected to at least know what a Scrum is, what a Scrum team is, what it's for, and where to go to get more information about it. If you've never participated in an Agile team or a Scrum team, that's okay. But knowing that that stuff exists gives you a leg up on your peers. And all your engineering colleagues will have to know how to do it as well. And they're just as bad at it as tech writers are. So it's okay when you're first learning it to not know everything. Just ask lots of questions. So those are some of the roles. It's just mumbo jumbo until you're actually using it. By all means, when you dig into these things, you'll want to learn these things and watch a couple videos about them, and they're all important. But I think this is the interesting stuff. You have different types of meetings, prescriptive types of meetings that happen at regular cadences. A sprint is a small cycle of work, usually in 2 or 4 week iterations. And every sprint cycle, the team commits to a bunch of work that they're going to deliver together as a team. If someone doesn't hit their goals, the team doesn't hit their goals. But you try to plan a sprint ahead so that you always know what you're supposed to be working on next. That sprint is a small iteration of work, which multiple sprints build up into a product or to a feature, and they all get delivered or not delivered. Sometimes the outcome of a sprint is that we did not hit our goals because that thing that we thought we could do, we couldn't actually do it. And so during a retrospective, kind of a look back on how we accomplished or didn't accomplish our goals, we might say, next time we need to know what the hell we're talking about before we commit to delivering this thing in 2 weeks. It's not possible. We need to break it up into smaller chunks of work. Now those roles in that previous slide, those are all people who interact on a sprint team or an Agile team and what their responsibilities are and things like that. And they get very precise and prescriptive, but Agile is what you make of it. You can use it as strictly or as loosely as you want, depending, as long as the team agrees and there's a shared understanding of what's expected. Now these again are things that are defined and are important in a sprint goal. Or sorry, in a sprint, but less important to know for this presentation. But these words look like they look like Chinese to most regular English-speaking people. They don't mean anything almost. They feel like made-up words or things. But I guarantee you that these are things that you will say every day, every hour when you work for a software company, because these are the things that help guide you and help you organize your work and your priorities and what the outcomes are meant to be. Now, I'm right at time, which is great because I've already done a little bit on Atlassian tools. But you can see, I don't know if you can see the connection, but Atlassian tools are meant to do Agile stuff. Agile teams use Atlassian tools. The two things used to be synonymous at one point because we had a feature called Agile stuff, and we kind of moved away from that. But knowing you can use Atlassian tools to help teach you Agile, for example. You can make sprints inside Jira. You can use story points. You can use, Confluence has a retrospective template and a bunch of other things. So Atlassian tools are built to do Agile. So that's why it makes a lot of sense to have that conversation together. Now, and where your role as a technical writer is a member on an Agile team. You'll be a participant where you're expected to deliver certain types of features, or you have other kind of responsibilities. So all that stuff is within just a single industry of which tech writing plays a role. And I've only started interacting with these things toward the later half of my career. So it's easy to see or to feel overwhelmed or to get lost in these things. But I didn't need to know Agile for the first 8-10 years of my career. I didn't know it. It was completely foreign concept to me. I still made lots of money. I still got hired at every company I went to. I still had recruiters beating down my door. It's not required. But what is required is that you've got to be curious, and you gotta be interested in technology, and you have to be interested in people. Tech writing is not a job where you can just sit in a hole and bang away at your keyboard for hours and hours on end. Go be a creative writer if you don't like people, because tech writing, you're going to be interacting with human beings every day, and that's going to be how you get your job done. So the tools of the trade are going to vary. They'll come and go. The interpersonal skills and the communication skills you learn in UCF are going to be invaluable, but more so to teach you how to learn and to teach you how to kind of extract information from subject matter experts. So I know I said a lot, and we're already at time. I do want to give you guys an opportunity to ask a couple more questions, or to dig in a little deeper, or anything. Everything's on the table. I will cease to speak now for a moment.
Not a question, but that was an excellent presentation. I just have to say.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, lots of information that
Tons.
I'm sure everybody got something great out of it.
Yeah, it's probably too much information for just one session, but I'm glad you think so.
Yeah, absolutely. And like Claire said in the chat, we're gonna have a recording available. So in case you need to go back and just look at this, take notes, we'll have that for you.
Oh yeah, make sure Dr. Flamia sees it.
Oh yeah, I can send that to her. Let her know that.
Please do. A round of applause. Thank you, Claire.
Wait, is Dr. Flammy your mom?
No, Dr. Flammy is just one of my, she's one of my old profs.
Oh,
Dr. Casimir Paz is my mother.
okay.
Dr. CP. She does lit theory. She used to do Comp 1 or Comp 2. I don't know if she still does. Yeah, but she's the only Black faculty member in the English department.
That's awesome.
She is a tough cookie, but everyone who finishes her class always says they learned a ton, and I can attest to that. That she knows what she's talking about, and she's very good at what she does. She just has high expectations and doesn't take bullshit. So. Seems like I've exhausted all the questions, which means I either did a great job or a terrible job. I'll take it as both. I can always try to do better, so by all means, give me feedback. Let me know what you think. Connect with me on LinkedIn. I'll send my LinkedIn profile. As professionals, you all should not just have a LinkedIn profile. So if you don't, you need to go create one tonight, and then fill it out appropriately. Don't just create one everywhere. But you should get really used to saying, oh, let's connect on LinkedIn and know how to use the QR code and know how to share things. Like, it is your bread and butter. It's within your interest to not just know how to use LinkedIn, but to get comfortable with it, because it's actually a place where you can make some money with your engineering colleagues who hate writing. Say, hey man, I'll do your LinkedIn profile for you for $100. They make good money later on in life. They'll be fine. In light of your being jealous of the technical writing degree, moving towards tech communication instead, among the what's in a name job titles you described, do you most closely align with content development specialist, or do you want to mold your role further? Michael, that is a fantastic question. And so I miss being on a product team. I miss being a genuine content designer. And in my current role, as a content development specialist, I'm actually more of a generalist designer than I am a content focused designer. The way I describe myself is I'm a designer who focuses on the content instead of being a content designer. The difference seems moot, but it is important. I miss it some, but I like being remote. I like the team that I'm on. I'm the design expert. I work on a team of 5. The other 4 people are all engineers. So it's nice to be an expert in something and to not be challenged in what you think that you know all the time, and for people to be so appreciative of your work. But I do a lot of image creation, video editing, and other stuff that has nothing to do with writing. And I like it. I enjoy it very much. It's not the place. I want to be a leader where I run a team of technical writers or a team of content designers. That's where I think my calling is and where I'll be best, because I have a lot of integrity and I have a lot of empathy. So, and as you can see, I have a lot of knowledge to share. So I think that's where my calling is being a content design manager, or technical writing manager. So I don't know, whatever gets me closer towards that is where I'll steer my career towards. But if I didn't have to make money and money was no object, I'll be honest with you, I'd probably just go be an English teacher and a soccer coach. Like, that seems like a much more fun lifestyle for me. I have kids and they'll be starting college soon, so I need more money than public school teacher can probably afford as of right now. And that sucks to say out loud, family full of teachers, but that is what it is. That's me in a nutshell. Sky reminds everyone to fill out the form. That's really interesting. And I thought about leading a team of tech writers in the longer term too. Yeah. And, so one of the first people I worked for in my first regular salary position in 2008, Dr. Sherry Stewart, got a PhD from UCF in tech comm. So yeah, it's totally a thing, being a technical writing manager. I don't think you need a PhD. I don't even think you need an advanced degree to do it. But yeah, if you focus on project management and leadership with an emphasis in technical writing, there are lots of managers who lead teams of tech writers. And some of them are former technical writers, some of them aren't. Let's see, what else do I got for you guys? I think I have one other thing to share. I would say connect with me on LinkedIn, Twitter. I'm huge on Twitter now. What else? I think I've exhausted my knowledge.
Yeah, and for
by all
anybody
means,
interested,
reach out.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll be posting your information and contact in our Discord also. I'll make sure to do that. So connect with John on LinkedIn, on Twitter also. And like you said, he's got a lot of knowledge to share. So he's always open.
Let me just one last thing. A goal to shoot for. Atlassian sometimes hires tech writing grad students. Like I say grads. They call them grad employees. So I look up a thing called Hack House Atlassian, and you'll see why that is something that you should look forward to. I'm so desperate to get a UCF grad into the grad program at Atlassian. We've tempered down the hiring on it because of COVID, but we usually hire 1 or 2 of these people, and it's pretty competitive. So you're gonna have to have a good portfolio, know a lot about Atlassian, and be really energetic. But look up Hack House, you'll be impressed. All right, folks. I actually have a meeting that's going to start soon. Thank you so much, John. I'm willing to do this anytime about any topic. They used to do a Microsoft Word styles workshop back in the day that I found really useful. That kicked off my experience working with Word. I'd be happy to do workshops like that at any time for anything. Just let me know, John. We'll work it out.
Yeah, and no problem, John. It was great to have you. We'd love to have you back too, some future event.
Yeah, I look forward to it. I'm in Orlando now, so you can see me more often.
Alrighty, and
This
if
has
any of
been
you
great.
else wanna,
Great presentation.
Yeah, folks, I gotta hop. Sorry to jet so soon, guys, but get in touch.
No, it's all right. Take care, John. All right, and if any of you haven't filled out that meeting, also with the wave. Yeah, he's feeling that
All right.
love.
Well, thank y'all for coming.
Yeah, gonna stop the recording right now. But hope you guys got a lot of great information out of that. Give me one moment.